loaf of bread so I could put a potato in with it. Will I do that for you? Okay. Okay. Come on down now. Come on, I'll move.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our Gaia journey. We've been calling it the arrival for many reasons, to welcome you all to the arrival of this moment. But also over the last 14 weeks, we have been coming together to experience a journey of multiple different places and spaces where each of us have been sitting and time together. And I'll share a little bit about that journey. But for those of you who may be just joining for the first time, a warm welcome to you. And for those of you who have been joining week after week after week, a warm welcome to you as well. It has been a joy to be on this journey with you. And we have been together, some of us in an earlier session today, and for many of you who may be joining again, welcome. And if you are just joining for the first time, welcome again. We have so many great things in store. I'll just jump us right into to sharing a little bit about the journey we've been on with a few slides. And we're here in this final inhale together. And the inhale and the exhale have really been this kind of digestive process. You know, as we started this journey back in March, we had just realized that COVID-19 was becoming a global pandemic, and that many of the systems in our world that we're kind of just holding along were actually not sustainable, and they were hitting a wall. And that we knew that another world was possible. And we could sense that as in this moment of transition, this moment of disruption, that we were being called on this journey together to explore what might be possible. What might be possible if we come together. And we've been using this arc of Theory U, developed by Otto and many others in the Presencing Institute, to really stay with what's happening, to really look at what we're experiencing, to tune in to a deep resonance within ourselves and that kind of vertical alignment, and to move forward together. And that experience of this this momentum, this movement, staying with, deep resonance and moving with, that's been happening over this 14-week journey. But it's also been happening within each one of our experiences together. So on March 27th, we started with Vandana Shiva, Dana Cunningham, and the Noongar elders and leaders, Noel Nanup, Richard Wally, and Carol Enns. And with each of those, we actually experienced a moment of this disruption. So with Vandana Shiva, we saw what could be possible with the collapse of the food systems. That the way that we feed ourselves, the way that we nourish our bodies, the way we tend to the earth, that it wasn't sustainable. And we saw that collapse immediately with COVID-19. We then heard from Dana Cunningham about structural violence and structural racism. She spoke about structural violence as a set of human agreements. And what we've seen over the last few weeks, months, is something that we knew was there, but we've seen a huge rise of the dismantling of these systems that no longer work for us. So now I stand here with you in awe of all of the journey that we've been on together, and the many, many people who stepped forward in this moment to share with us, to hold this space together. There have been 13,000 people on this journey together. And there have been hundreds who have been holding, as you see here, the space for each of us in our 70 plus countries, in our close to 200 hubs, in our 8 language tracks. It's a pretty immense amount of work. And Rachel had shared with us a video earlier this morning. It will now be shared across social media, that gives a glimpse of the voices, the many voices who have been holding this journey with us. So thank you, Rachel, who has been continuing to hold that together, and to all the people who have been really working together tirelessly to really hold this moment of disruption, this moment of transition, this moment of deep resonance and moving forward together. So one of the people, in addition to Rachel and another person in this very long list, is Eva Pomeroy, who has been holding this sense-making experience, which is also called research. And she has been really taking a look at, in focus groups and conversations and surveys, what has been this experience for so many of us. And she will continue to carry that forward with a wonderful research team to really allow us to sense make what is happening, what is wanting to happen. Eva, I think, is just back in. She's been having some internet issues, so I'm going to turn it over to her, and we hope that Eva, you can share with us these few moments of what's been going on in our journey. Over to you, Eva.
Great, thanks, Antoinette. So yeah, we wanted to come back and bring in a piece from the research that was present in the data at the last inhale, and then came up again in the focus groups over the last week or so. And it's around clarifying intention and sort of what that looks like across the community. And so there are a few things. One is that some of you are telling us that you're still sort of sensing into your intention. For others, you're sharing that your intention has started to clarify. And one of the things that's been quite interesting for many is that the intention that you're sitting with now is quite different from the one that you were holding when you came into GAIA. And that's unfolded in a few ways. So some people are moving into or toward action out in the world projects, engaging with sort of unexpected stakeholders or in different places or different ways that than you were expecting. But there's also been a move sort of in the different direction of scale. And I think that was best represented by Joel in the focus groups, who shared that he initially came into GAIA really thinking he was going to be working on systemic change. But as he slowed down and started to sense into what was most important for him, his next step action was local. And he laughed, he said it was very local, it's at the level of his family. And so I wanted to reflect back to the community that the actions that people are stepping into are taking place on a wide range of scale. And I think that's particularly relevant because what did surface in the focus groups in the last week were some people saying, well, actually, it's hard to crystallize action when you're holding systemic change as your intention. It's almost too big, and it's almost a block to stepping into action. So wanting to acknowledge that for many in this community, the steps that we're moving into are on smaller levels, on more local levels. So that's a bit from the data. Also would like to mention that we are going to have our last survey today, and we'll share that in the chat towards the end of this session. And it's really focusing on impact, but also on getting input from all of you around how we move forward from here. So with that, I'll hand over to you, Otto.
Actually, I think we're going to go to Michelle next. But before we go to Michelle, I'd like to, first of all, thank you, Eva, for sharing that with us and reminding us of that small action that we can take. That especially in this session now, we will go into movement building and institutions, and we have a very special guest with us who will share her company and experience of the last few decades, but that it may begin with one small act, one small seed. So thank you, Eva, for reminding us of that and for sharing with us. One of our Gaia Journey participants who, really has been right alongside all of us together. We've been hearing these examples, these living examples of what has been emerging in all of these different places. For many of us, as our borders have been closed, we've been able to cross-pollinate globally. And we heard this morning from Nora Wilhelm in Switzerland, and Willie Azarkoya in Mexico. One of the things that that Nora and Willie shared was how they were able to cross-pollinate these little sparks in these different places in the world. And Nora referred to it as a global forest with local roots. And one of those people who have been holding the local roots for the continent of Africa from her place in South Africa is Michelle Ashen, who has been really using all of these methods and tools and just creating tremendous change in her community. And I'd like to invite Michelle to share for just a few minutes about your project and what has been evolving for you. Over to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Antoinette. Sure. Can I just say that I can actually feel my heart is like beating in my neck, and I can actually feel it. I feel so exposed and so vulnerable right now, but I also feel safe because I'm not alone. We're not alone. When I was asked to share my story, I was really overwhelmed with gratitude and great humility, because this is not only my story, but the story of millions of women across Africa and around the world. The two images on the screen, they represent the women and the children who are a part of my journey. This is a painful story, and while at times it still hurts, it has a happy ending at sunset. Joy comes in the morning. A few years ago, I suffered at the hands of a disease called burnout and almost died. It left me catatonic, numb, medicated, and in darkness. The pain was my portal to consciousness, and it was in the silence that my restless soul found peace. And it was also here that my heart noticed its purpose. This was the start of my awakening, where I became intentional in choosing courage over comfort. This journey for me has been about getting closer to the person I've dreamed I would be since I was a child. I've been raised by real superheroes. My uncle Bill Jardine was an anti-apartheid activist who fought and died for my freedom with Nelson Mandela. My uncle Bill planted a seed in my soul, but today it is my parents, my 88-year-old grandmother, and teachers like Otto, Aggie, and Martin Kalungubanda, who nurture and cultivate my being to contribute towards closing the gap. It was a little over 18 months ago, and I'll never forget the day I woke up with an idea to establish a free self-mastery and coach training organization and community that has since become a container of safety, learning and self-development, healing, creativity, and is a hub of innovative African solutions that address African problems across various acupuncture points in healthcare, technology, and education. Through sustained consciousness, I have witnessed how participants of Africans United are turning adversity into their greatest victory, even during this pandemic. I'm a single mother with a day job, 2 young children, and I do this work at night and on weekends. My kids and I, we think all lives matter, so it doesn't feel like a sacrifice when we skip the chocolate cake to help someone in need. I do this because I care. This is the spirit of Ubuntu. I am because you are. And I've come to know that while we call this Ubuntu in Africa, there is a circle of 7, or perhaps a solidarity circle, number 33, who love and care for me and this continent that I call my motherland as though it were their own. The Presencing Institute has not only gifted the world the Gaia journey, that gifted Africa relationships and opportunities to co-initiate and co-create solutions that contribute to the healing of our wounds, the wounds that are holding us back from unlocking our full potential. Once a week for 2 hours throughout GAIA, I got to learn and experience a love like I've never known. Evelyn, Pratibha, Moses, Kenny, Shona, Anna, and Rafida have heard and seen me broken at what my children and I have had to go through, but they have also lifted me up, held me in their warm embrace, and inspired me to keep moving forward. And then there are the macro hubs, my co-hosts for the Education Hub, Eva, Valerie, and Babette. These men and women are impacting Africa in the way that they care, the way that they show up in the world and make it a safe place for me to be. Thank you just doesn't seem like enough. Out of the darkness of burnout emerged Africans United, as well as a United Nations leader who embodies and is one of the key authors of the UN leadership model, Samad Khan. He got this particular ball rolling in Africa by introducing me to Theory U, and I will forever be grateful to him for the blessing of his leadership, his compassion, and his commitment to humanity. This is the power of Theory U. This is systems leadership. This is how we create a sustainable world. Sustainability for me, and in my observation, is what happens with conscious alchemy. Conscious alchemy is another gift that emerged with Theory U and will soon be released to the world in service of Africa, women, and young people who are our future. I have so much I want to say about what I've learned on this journey and how it's transformed the lives across Africa. It's given us hope, courage, strength, and the knowledge and wisdom to heal ourselves from the inside out. If you take anything away from what I shared with you today, please raise your level of consciousness to see and feel the human suffering that is around you. Don't look the other way. Have the courage to ask for help or to offer it if you're in a position of privilege. It's not enough to say all lives matter. And in the words of Paulo Coelho, the world will be changed by your example, not your opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for sharing with what is with you now, and for sharing your story with us and inspiring us for what's possible with conscious alchemy, with being intentional in choosing courage over comfort, and for healing from the inside out, and for taking on that call for you and for your people, and for sharing it here with us. I turn it over to Otto for further framing on our moment today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I just want to sit with what you just shared with us for a little moment, kind of the power of your story, your presence, the vulnerability that touched each of us, and the Ubuntu spirit that you brought into, that you are bringing into our global community. Let's just sit with that for a moment. Thank you. So I'm not so sure now how much I can really add what you already shared with us, maybe it's just kind of underlining certain aspects of what you just so powerfully embodied in your story. And one aspect is what Eva actually mentioned, right? So that when you look at how real change was pointing us towards, which is when you look at real change, then nature is our teacher. And how does change happen in nature? Small, right? It's from seeds, it grows. So it's kind of so small that we almost don't notice it, and we don't notice the importance. And the other principle that you embodied is really that facing our own shadows is not a problem that we need to fix, but seeing our own shadow, in fact, is the source for transformation, is the source for stepping into a new world. And it reminds me of the opening remarks by Dr. Noel during the first GAIA session, the Aboriginal Nyungo elder, who shared with us, and I quote, "All we need to do is to have a piece of the path to the future. And that's ours. And we polish that, and we hone that, and we place that in the pathway that we are building. And as we build that pathway, it changes us as the builders of that path. And it also shapes the destination that we are going to." So that's really what today is about. That's really what this session is about, landing that. Now, landing kind of the piece that's ours to hold and to polish and to cultivate, so it turns into a seed for transformation. So what is the seed that you are holding? So what's kind of the piece of the pathway to the future that has been maybe crystallizing in maybe very small ways that you want to really put your attention and intention on, and move it, and continue to focus it, as we cultivate the deeper conditions. When we started this journey, we framed it, or rather kind of by bringing in Vandana Shiva and Dana Cunningham, we really focused our attention on the ecological divide, right? The violence that we enact against nature, and the social divide, the violence that we enact against each other. And then also, in each of these cases, we focus on the spiritual divide, the violence that we enact against ourselves. So what we said is, and what we saw in many cases is, that on the bigger system level, we collectively create results that almost nobody wants. Right? And what is that? It's the deepening of the ecological divide, the deepening of the social divide, the deepening of the spiritual divide. When we talk about reimagining and reshaping our civilization, what we really mean is a transformation of our societal institutions, of our economy, and our ways of living and working together in a way that allows us to bridge the ecological divide, to bridge the social divide, to bridge the spiritual divide. And in addressing that transformation from a viewpoint that comes from awareness-based systems view, we know kind of that at the root of awareness-based systems change is really, one, you cannot understand a system unless you change it. Two, you cannot change a system unless you transform consciousness. And three, you cannot transform consciousness unless you make a system see and sense itself. But then, in one of the GAIA sessions on the Portuguese track, the indigenous leader from Brazil, Ubiraci Patacho, listened to this and he said, yes, and we need to add a fourth principle, which is to do all this, we have to be the system. We have to embody the system that we want to see. Today, we live in a moment of profound disruption where the ground is shifting beneath our feet. It's a similar moment to 1989, when the Berlin Wall collapsed. Back then, we saw the beginning of the end of the Cold War system. It was a wall that collapsed between two different social systems, capitalism and socialism. Today, a different type of wall is collapsing. It's an inner wall. It's a wall that separates us from the system, that separates us from each other and from ourselves. As this wall breaks down, we become aware of the systemic and institutional racism that manifest in, as we discussed last time, three forms of violence, which is direct violence, structural violence, and attentional violence, by which I mean not seeing another in one's highest future possibility. And we said last time that to address, to transform these forms of violence that have been going on for too long, we need to illuminate our own blind spots. And which is number one, not truly seeing what's going on, right? The issue of the frozen mind. And that has to do with really blinding ourselves by our ignorance and by our unconscious biases. And I gave the example of myself, so when, not knowing that the use of slave patrols to capture runaway slaves was really one of the precursors of the formal police force here in America, particularly in the South. In other words, I was unaware of the direct continuity between slavery, lynching, and police brutality that we're seeing playing out today against African American citizens in this community, in this country. Secondly, not feeling what I see. So an example for that is in my own case, yes, I know about all the inequalities and all the structural violence that's going on, but do I really open my heart to that? Or do I enact some version of an othering, right? So where I have really an emotional distance to what's going on that makes me stuck, not only in my own view, like down here, but stuck in my own skin, in my own kind of collective emotional skin. And number three, when we see something, we feel something, not acting on what we see and feel. And that's the issue of the frozen will. And that sometimes comes with fear and moves into depression. So basically getting, stuck inside ourselves, not tapping into the emerging future, or fanaticism and destruction, kind of moving overly outside, right? Kind of losing the balance on the other side. And that's, I believe, right? If we want to transform these three forms of violence, if we want to transform systemic racism and trauma, those are the blind spots we have to investigate, both on an individual level, but also on an institutional level. And it's hard work, but it is exactly what is so inspiring to see right now that this is beginning. And how does it begin? Small, but it's important to attend to that and to continue that pathway. So zooming out a little bit here, what is it that we see? We see that, you know, systemic racism and trauma is really enacted, right, by an architecture of separation, you could say, what you see here on the left-hand side, a separation that disconnects us from the world, right, not seeing, that disconnects us from each other, not feeling, that disconnects us from the true sources of transformative action, right, not connecting with these sources. And where our work is, where we need to go, is to enact architectures of connection that allow us to access the unconditional witnessing, to truly see each other, to access our unconditional love, to truly not only see, but also hold each other, and access our own unconditional courage and confidence, to truly supporting each other in order to then move on a collective journey that, you know, goes through, you know, is facing kind of our collective shadows, right? Also on a collective level, going through the stages of reckoning, reconciliation, and reparations in order to truly progress on a process of healing and regenerating the foundations of our communities around the world. So the shadow is not a problem that we need to fix. Seeing our own shadows, seeing our own blind spots is the source for transformation that allows us to step into a new world. And for that reason, the real question that we want to pose to you today is, what is your piece you're holding? When you look into the mirror of the shadow in the context of your own life and work, in the context of your own country or community, what is it that you see? Where is it that you are not seeing what's going on, the frozen mind? Where is it that you're seeing something but not feeling it, the frozen heart? Where is it that you see and feel something but you are not acting on it, the frozen will?
Thank you, Otto. And as we integrate Otto's words, those three questions, where is it that I'm not seeing? Where is it that I'm not feeling? Where is it that I have that frozen will? And we sit with Michelle's story and Michelle's experience of Ubuntu. I am because you are, choosing courage over comfort, and that conscious alchemy. Before we go any further, I would just like to invite us to take a moment to let all of this land and to let all of this just settle for a few moments in the body. We've heard a lot, and we are about to hear another incredible story. And as we do that, just returning back to the body, to the self, to that reflection within our own being. And for just a moment, feeling feet on the ground, from that place, feeling our own roots to the earth, to our piece of the path, to that connected experience of our head to the sky, that place of limitless possibility and expansion. And right there in the middle, that heart connection that holds the many hundreds of us that are gathered at this moment in our little piece of the earth. And just softening each of those places, the mind, the space around the heart to allow us to connect, and that space just below the belly button that invites us into action. And we'll come back to this space, this reflective space, after we hear from our next guest. Before I introduce her, I'd love to just hear from our voices in chat form. So if you'd like to share just what is coming up for you, what is alive for you in this moment, hearing Michelle's story, hearing this framing by Otto, what Eva shared with us earlier, just any sentence, statement that is alive for you now, if you'd like to share in the chat, and we can get a sense of all of our faces across our Zoom rooms and YouTube. We'll just read a few of them out. I feel hopeful, connectedness and love. Nature is not always small. We are all one. What is mine to do? It is so painful to feel that I assume it is better not to feel. Courage is collective. Ready to do the work ahead. We are together. And with that, I just would like to turn us towards Eileen Fisher, who is joining us together in this session. And I have had the great pleasure of sitting with Eileen over the last 10 years, both Eileen and Otto, over the last decade. Hi, Eileen. And we've been doing some incredible work together, but Eileen has actually been really the holder in many ways for this GAIA journey, one of the many, many holders for this GAIA journey and this experience. And it has been, I remember I've had these moments where I have sat and watched Eileen and Otto talk, and Eileen has an incredible story of her company, which feels like it continues on and on in a beautiful way. But I love when Eileen says there's always more to learn. And Eileen, really, you describe yourself as a problem solver, that when there's a problem, you just dive in and see possibility. And that has been incredible to be with you in this journey over the last 10 years. But to see you and Otto have that conversation, there's a moment where Eileen is acting, and Eileen, sometimes you're like, I don't know how to articulate this or say, exactly what we're doing here. And then Otto will say exactly what's happening. And it's like, oh, that's it, And so there's this incredible magic that lives between the two of you that I've had the great joy of just, seeing and supporting. So I turn it over to the two of you for a dialogue that we can be part of and then continue our own practice. So Otto and Eileen, over to you.
Thank you so much. And Let me add my words of gratitude, Eileen. Kind of, so you have been an inspiration, kind of both. I mean, many of us know that business is such a powerful force in society, but often it's really not a force for good. And I have been always inspired over the years, both kind of what you have been doing with your company, but also the how, kind of the leadership, the way kind of you embodied kind of a different set of principles that, for example, when you go to a business school, that's not what you would be taught. So I want to thank you for being the source of inspiration, kind of for personally for myself, but also for many other people in the community, and also really for supporting us and collaborating with us. I mean, we did together the Global Wellbeing Lab, and in many ways, you have been really a partner and supporter for the Presencing Institute. That really is at the core of why we can do now what we can do. GAIA would not have been without that. So I want to acknowledge that and thank you for that. And I want to just jump into the first question, kind of maybe to start a little bit like on the organization side. So you started, I think it was somewhere in the 1984 or something with $350, and then grew your company into many hundreds of millions of dollars revenue. And you decided to give a very significant part of ownership away for employee stock ownership. And you also made your company a B Corp. So let me start with that question. So why is it? So why would you as an entrepreneur kind of give the equity on your own company away for the employees? And what prompted you to do that?
Well, first, thank you, Otto. It's wonderful to be here with you again. Just kind of remembering being in Rio and other places with you. So Bhutan, it's a wonderful, wonderful work that you do. And I'm just proud to be a part of it. And just to back up and say that before ESOP, we always, the minute there was extra money in the company, my first impulse was to share the profits with the employees. So always at the end of the year, we would share anywhere from 10 to up to 25% of the profits, depending on how good the year was. And what we found is that people really felt like owners. They were part of it. They felt, that they weren't just doing it for me. They were sharing the wealth, so to speak. And so then when it came time to think about sort of divesting in part of the company, and I needed to make sure the company survived after I passed on, if that's meant to be. So we looked at different options, selling a piece of it, which I was never comfortable with outsiders owning a piece of the company. And since we weren't in the position that we needed to do that, this option came up, this employee stock ownership idea came up. And it actually wasn't just a gift of generosity from my part. It was kind of an interesting win-win situation because we were able to borrow money from the bank to gift the employees 40% of the stock, of the ownership. And then I was able to get the money from the loan, and over time the company paid the bank back. So we were in a good enough position to do that, which was great. So I don't want to take credit for being, such a generous person. So I just want to correct the record there. So that's one piece. But I think about being with you, and I don't know how many years ago that was that we went to Rio and we did the Happiness Project. But I remember that was the first time I learned about the 1% and about how the 1%, how the wealthier were getting wealthier and the poor were getting poorer. The middle class was disappearing. I had not heard that. And I think that the ESOP idea was already in place, and I'd already been giving profit sharing. I think that it was a feeling of, sort of sharing, and that felt right and fair. And then then along came the B Corp idea, and that came around more around sustainability and the environment and looking for new business models. The whole business model that it's all about profit and growth just seemed like kind of meaningless reason to work. You know, that was never why I started my business. It's nice to be successful and profitable. It's important because you can also do good work, but it's not the purpose of what we're doing, you know. So when I heard about the B Corp idea, and for those who don't know, B Corp is a new business model which includes, they measure not just your profitability, but you have to measure your environmental and your social impacts and report those out, and you don't get to become a member if you don't meet certain standards. And then because you're measuring, you keep working on trying to improve those aspects of your business. So it's a wonderful new model for anyone who doesn't know about it. And I think all businesses should share ownership and should also be B Corps. And I wanted to say also, the good thing is, especially now in these difficult times, you really see that, you know, people act like owners. You know, people really feel engaged in, you know, helping us to succeed during this really difficult time. You know, all of our stores were closed for over 2 months, you know, and it's a really challenging moment. But we had these financial advisors who said to me just the other day, your people are so different than any place we've ever been. It's like the way they work together, the way they try hard to, you know, get us what we need and work with us and share information, and the positivity, and, you know, it's just not like what we experience. Usually when people are having a struggle or a company's in trouble in some kind of way, people are negative and they see what's wrong and who's doing it right, you know, but this was more like, we're in this together, we're going to make this work, and, you know, how can we help the financial consultants get the information they need and help us to learn what we need to do.
So what I hear you saying is, you know, one way of, you know, responding to the blind spot, right? The blind spot being not knowing about the 1% and kind of middle class disappearing, right. The poor getting poorer, and learning then about that prompted you to move this idea that was already there, but make that more a priority, make it happen. And then, as it turns out, it's actually a win-win, right? Mm-hmm. So it's also good business. It's, you know, it's ethically the right thing to do, but it's also in a business perspective the right thing to do. So that's sometimes, right, the blind spot, right, works out that way, right? Not always, but so it's also important to point out when that is. And I remember these conversations well, Eileen, and I think another topic, I was impressed because you were the one who talked about when we went to Bhutan back then in Brazil and looked at these different models, and you talked about that your company was part of industry that was the second worst polluter on Earth, right? So that was your words. Or something around along these lines, and that you were thinking about really doing something about it. So that's like almost an even more unimaginable blind spot and shadow, right? Which is not only your company, but it's like the entire industry, and, you know, to some degree, ecological divide, the whole economy, right? So take us back, and then I think it was around that time, a little later, kind of, that you made a very profound decision. So take us back, you know, how did that happen? So how did you approach that blind spot? And what then, you know, what was the moment when you really made a decision there that was then reshaping the future path of your enterprise?
Right. Wonderful. Yes. First of all, I want to correct one statement you made, which is that the fashion industry or the clothing business is the second largest polluter. I know I told you that because at the time I believed that. And so people have told me that that's not exactly proven. We might be third. So I'm not sure what number we are, but it's pretty bad. So the point is that I was moved by that idea of, you know, of learning that, just as I was moved by the 1% piece of information. So we had already, I thought we were a pretty sustainable business. You know, basically we were about simple clothes, timeless pieces, you know, good quality materials, but there was a lot that we were still not doing. And, you know, we had a team already for many years, 20, 25 years, working on sustainability and looking at all of our materials and so on and so forth. And so then what had happened, and this was not my doing, this was others in the company, that they had arranged to do a workshop, because the idea was to bring the sustainability concept out further into the company, to embed it into the whole organization. So they brought leaders together to do this workshop. And I remember I was supposed to go to the workshop just to introduce and just to say, you know, I support this, you know. But what happened is that morning, I was sitting in my purpose chair. This is those little things one does, you know, and I journal every morning, just 3 pages, quick, what's coming up for me, sit in my purpose chair, what am I supposed to do? And I got this message like, oh my God, you're supposed to go to that workshop and you're supposed to stay the whole 4 days. So I went upstairs, packed my bag, went. And when I got there, I realized, oh, the main thing I realized was at one point, Sarah Schley, who you know was leading the workshop, and she turned to me and she said, Eileen, they need you to say yes to this. And this is when we were going to commit to being 100% sustainable company by 2020, which is kind of a crazy idea. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that isn't even possible. And I just remember saying, and she said, but if you commit, you're not going to get there, but you're going to get a whole lot further, because people are going to see that they can't make exceptions for this fabric or this thing that they're doing over here. They have to try hard to correct it. So I remember just standing up and saying, yes, we have to do this. And it was like, it's like, oh, that's my little act. You know, you were talking about that before. It's like, what's mine to do? To say yes. I don't even have to know how it's going to happen. But this is where I learned my voice matters too, which is a big deal for me, because I don't like to speak. I think you know that about me. I'm really shy. So, you know, standing up and saying yes to something I don't even know if it's possible was a huge deal. And to this day, Amy Hall, who runs that whole area, has said that was a turning point for the company, because then everyone felt permission to really, you know, move this work forward. And we are not 100%, but our materials are probably 75% eco-preferred and getting better all the time. And we're actually now in this place where we're thinking, how can we do more positive for the environment, like regenerative agriculture and recycling. Like this piece behind me, I wanted to be in front of it because it's part of our circular program of remaking our clothes and that kind of thing. So anyway, lots of creative, exciting things. So anyway, I'm going to stop. You have another question from me, Otto. You are also quiet and calm, and I'm like, I get really excited and start talking. Well,
that's what we want to hear, and just kind of to. I guess I have two questions here. So what was it back then in 2015? So what gave you the what kind of knowing or knowledge where you were operating on and saying yes to something you don't even know what it is, but you know would have a huge impact on the company? And number two, now in hindsight, 5 years later, so what did happen? So what is your today's assessment on that journey?
Yeah, that it was utterly the right thing, as impossible as it was. It's like the commitment, the idea of commitment. That's really what it was. Voice and commitment. It's like, this is going to be imperfect. I have no idea, but I have to commit. You know, I'm going to say it's like committing to getting married, although I probably didn't do a good job with that one. But, you know, making a commitment is really big. And I learned that, the importance of commitment, because, you know, commitment means you're going to just do your best. And you're going to fail, and you're going to try, and we have failed in places, and there's, you know, areas that we're just not doing as well as we would like, and there's so much to do. But when you commit, you learn, and things change, and, you know, people feel your passion and your commitment to things, and they come along, and that's what's been happening. We created our tiny factory, which I'm trying to keep alive during this time, and you know, where we're recycling and upcycling, and we we've made such, we've made a difference, and there's more to do. But we have other companies now. I heard this story, some small Canadian company, I don't know the name, that somebody's told me they have on their wall, what would Eileen do? Like, what would Eileen do about sustainability or in this kind of situation? I just thought, oh my goodness, that I think we're touching people, even if we can't do as much as we always want to do, and we're always trying, that we actually, through commitment, impact others completely, that we're not even aware of, that it's a ripple effect. Like you and the work you do, Otto, it just has, you don't even know the profound effects you've had on me and my company and all that you do. I'm so grateful.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do know kind of how much your example has inspired me and others really to understanding, that's a term I also learned from you, business as a movement, right? To see business as something that is actually connected with a deeper sense of purpose, right? That we can organize a movement around. And in fact, we are in a movement building moment right now. So maybe my question now is if you, and so the current moment is really how to, so there's the pandemic, right? And then, the COVID pandemic, and then there's kind of the pandemic of racism. So how is that? So how are you coping with that? And that is kind of the next wave of disruption where old stuff is ending, and everyone kind of has to lives in a situation where we need to reinvent ourselves. So how is that shaping up for your company right now?
Right. So there's sort of two questions in one. Yeah.
Yeah. And what is it you do as a leader and as a leadership team to lean into that moment?
Right. Well, the first thing I always do when we struggle or have a problem is gather people and listen. So with COVID, for example, it was just such a moment to just stop and to reassess, who are we? What are we trying to do? What's important here? What matters? And we're just back at the clothing and getting the clothing right, because the whole concept of the clothing was where we started, and that's what gives us a voice out in the world. So some of the clothing we sort of lost track of it, and gotten too much business, too much growth, too many garments, too much. So that's been one of the big things I've been working on, is just kind of reorganizing the company, the product itself, slowing it down, getting the product to sort of back to kind of great design, and getting it to be more inclusive in the way we work with our shapes and proportions and colors and that kind of thing. So that's another aspect, but that's right. That's the product itself, but it's a mirror in a way, because it's about, the concept was an idea of including. So, different body types and different shapes and different colors and that kind of thing. So some of that fell away. But I'm just going to go to your second part of your question, because that's kind of where I am right now, because this other piece, COVID, and what I'm working on in terms of the company and the product, and reorienting that, and is one thing. And the other is, and so it's that, I just want to say one last thing about that. It's a real, again, recommitment to radical simplicity, and that's what my clothes are about. And they're not about, so much, so many. Anyway, okay, put that over there. And the other one, the other part of your question had to do with, the other disruption, which is, what's going on with Black Lives Matter, and what we've been doing on what we're trying to do, which is who we are, which is to listen. And I think part of my blind spot has been not listening, to the Black employees, even though they've tried, not really seeing, their issue and how they feel, and just thinking it's, I don't know, just I can't know it, I can't understand. So then I just, haven't done enough or said enough. So this past few weeks has been really quite traumatic with, our employees, trying to speak up, and with what's going on. It's just like, there's a part of me that wants to do that denial thing and turn off the television. I can't listen to this. I can't see one more story where one more Black person is shot in the back. I can't stand it anymore. But what's mine to do? What's mine to do here? So I can protest, abolish the police and those things, which I did too. But I have this company and I have this platform. And so what's mine to do? So we gathered and actually, again, not my doing, this came through the people and culture world, but it was the Black employees rising up and saying, we want to be heard, and I'm like, of course, when? Let's have a meeting next week. Let's listen. And so that was my kind of saying, my little act, say yes. Okay, let's listen. And so actually in the midst of all of this I'm trying to do to save the company, so to speak, in the midst of COVID, I'm like, no, this is important. This is another huge thing that has the potential to heal. And we have something we're supposed to do, and I don't know what it is. So help me know. So we did these listening. We did 3 round tables, and we listened to 100 Black employees. They didn't all get to speak, but they tried over the 3 hour-and-a-half sessions, and it was very moving. And I think one of the person leading the work said, okay, so the 3 leaders, they just wanted me and our 2 other key leaders to listen. And the idea was, this is not your time to talk. Just stay with this experience. Don't say anything until the very end. Don't defend yourself. This is just a time to really hear. So we just sat with the experience and listened, and it was just people told their stories of the microaggressions and the little things and the way the customers speak to them and the way their leaders sometimes speak to them. And a couple of people called me out for my silence. And they were so brave. I was so touched by them. And I thought, wow, here I go again. It's yes, I don't even know what I'm saying yes to, but I know you guys can help us figure it out because you know what we're doing wrong and you can help us. So I commit to this process. I wholeheartedly say yes. And I don't know what I'm saying yes to, just like with sustainability, I don't know, but I know if I say yes, if I make a commitment, if the leaders make a commitment, then we will begin the process of change and that we can do our little piece in helping to heal our company, and maybe it'll ripple.
I know we are almost out of time, but I do want to reflect for a moment and then ask you a closing question. So the reflection is, when I listen to what you just shared, so maybe it's your humbleness kind of to always attribute kind of the successes to your environment, to other people. But when I listen to the stories you share, what I see you doing is listening the new into reality, right? So really attending to the seeds, not kind of born out of your, you kind of telling people what to do, but really listening the new that's already there in a dormant form, listening that into reality and then affirming that, right? Kind of to, so I think that is such a stark contrast to how people usually think about leadership, which is me, the super ego. So it is impossible to not notice that the most catastrophic failures in responding to the current pandemic is all men, right? The Trump and Bolsonaros and Johnsons of the world. And that those countries, most of them, not all of them, but those countries who are the shining lights, kind of that had a very different response, is all led by women. So I wanna ask you, what is your, and you have in your organization, right? It's largely women-led.
Right.
So what is your own observation and take on that? Because in a way, what I always found interesting about the Eileen Fisher story is kind of that you really embody and live a different set of principles. So what is women in leadership? What are your reflections and thoughts and observations on that? And how does that relate to how we should reinvent ourselves in the current moment of disruption we are living in?
Wow, that's a good question. Okay, so I guess feminine leadership, right, is what it is to a certain extent, for sure. And so I think of it as listening and being inclusive, even when we're not always doing it perfectly. It's what we try to do. You know, we're collaborative, sometimes to a fault. Sometimes there are too many people in meetings and things get really complicated. And so where I've come with at this age is that my sort of feminine leadership and my listening and those capacities have been a lot of my success, or our success. And at the same time, we see the shadow side, you know, the need for the more masculine kinds of principles, the structure, or I say the bones. We're not good at creating structures, and maybe we're not good at creating hierarchy, which is maybe good, but we're not so great at creating the structures and accountabilities and roles and clarity. So decision-making is a little slow. And so, you know, it's worked for us. And so what I've come to really believe, it's the balance of masculine and femininity that is in all of us and that we all need to find. And we're looking in our organization for both. You know, we really need to honor both in all of us. And I think what's happening in business a lot is there just aren't enough women. And so I don't know, I just think we just need to be out there more in business and in the government and all those places. And it just needs to be balanced because we just bring another point of view to things.
Thank you so much, Eileen. I mean, the balance, right, that in reality is mostly missing in most institutions today. And that, you know, in East Asia, right, you would frame as a balance between yin and yang. And and it's, you know, wherever we go, it is out of balance, and kind of how to rebalance that relationship is truly one of our big challenges right now. And with that, I turn it over to Antoinette to lead us into a little moment of reflection.
Thank you, Otto. Thank you, Eileen. Wow. So many pieces. So many pieces. And I want to do something that's a little bit out of our regular box. And I saw, Eileen, you made a shape in the body. And when Otto invited us to look at the blind spot and to think about that, and throughout this experience, we've worked with Arowana, also one of our dear friends, and we've done this work of moving from sculpture 1 to sculpture 2. And you did this movement that just really struck me, Eileen. And it is this movement of kind of putting the head down, like hands over the head, like I don't want to see it. I don't want to turn on the like I just can't watch it anymore. I can't see it. I don't want to hear it. And what Michelle talked us through with that piece of having courage and the conscious alchemy, that inner work of really feeling into that moment of what is mine to do here. And how you've done that with sustainability. You've done that with, you know, this moment of Black Lives Matter. And you've done that in so many little moments in your own life and in your leadership. And I just want to invite us into embodying that shape and embodying that shape of what that is for you. of that moment where you just don't want to see it, you don't want to feel it. Thomas Hubel was with us months ago, and he said you kind of, it's like you have this thing that's playing on the TV and you want to throw that TV in the ocean. That's how far away. And because that's our trauma, and it becomes something that if we don't integrate it, then we put it outside of ourselves and we try to make it part of our past. But if we can integrate it and bring it into our present. So what I'd like to do is to invite us just to embody and hold that shape for a moment. So wherever you're sitting, wherever you are, just to feel into the body. And if perhaps that means a kind of tightening, for me, that feels just like a tightening in the body. It actually feels like a closing of my fists. I feel that tightening in my stomach. Michelle talked about that tightening in the throat. And just staying with that sculpture one. Arowana reminds us that this is not a sustainable position, and at some point the body wants to move. So staying with that position for as long as you need to, as long as the body wants to be there. And when the body begins to find movement, just following it, not necessarily pushing with the mind, just following it. Noticing the shift, however small it is. Staying with the breath. And letting the body land in sculpture 2. And that work of sculpture 1 to sculpture 2 and what may have caused that shift, that may continue to evolve. There may be sculpture 3, sculpture 4, sculpture 50. But we will invite each other to share what has been coming up for us in small breakout rooms. And just notice what's in the body. There has been so much in this session. What is in the body? What is living there for you now? What is in any moment, what we're holding, what we're dealing with in our own leadership and our own ability to choose courage. So I'll turn it to breakout rooms for just about 8 to 10 minutes. And just the invitation would be to share with each other what is coming up, and to try within that short window of time, which I know is not enough, to just share one at a time, your name, what's coming up for you, what's resonating from this moment, and try to make space for everyone to speak. As we heard, voice is so important, and to just do that, maybe allow everyone to speak once before anyone speaks twice. So enjoy your time together, and we'll see you back here in just under 10 minutes. Hi.
She's here.
Welcome back, everybody. So I'm in a new place, but we're all back together, and welcome back. So thank you all for spending that time in the breakouts together. And I know it's never enough, but I know that it's always fruitful. And we'd love to hear just a few voices from the various rooms and conversations. So if you'd like to share, you can start just by sharing in the chat. And you can also share in the, we'll do just a few voices in our usual way. You can click on participants at the bottom of the screen, use your little blue raise hand function, and we will call you in. So go for it. Oh, wow. Beautiful in the chat already. Perhaps we start with David, who's here in channel 1.
Fantastic. Thank you. It becomes more and more clear as we go along that what we need to do is to localize. And we hear from, and that's what makes us happy, whether it's the localization of everyone smiling at each other and learning how to read the smiles under their masks, are finding some joy in gardening and doing things locally and taking care of your business in a local way so it's sustainable, and just getting on and doing it. And that's just that action with the right intention is what makes us happy. Thank you for that, and thank you for the whole series.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for your input and your participation and being here together. We'll go next to Carola.
Well, I had just a wonderful group, and we were sharing actually about how impressed we were by Eileen's example, by her words, by her vulnerabilities, and the power she has, and then we shared a big, deep thankfulness for this whole journey, and this is what I felt that I wanted to express here. It's so nurturing to get support for opening a heart in business, what I do, and having some support or a peer group that shares the same values and that also gives meaningful, impactful knowledge and input. So just a big thank you from my side, or from our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Carola. We'd love to hear from so many. I know there are so many of us that we also would love to see Kelvy's image and to be with that for a few moments before we hear closing words from Eileen. So we turn it over to Kelvy.
Hi, everyone. I'm assuming you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, great. So this image has been an image that I've been working on through the entire GAIA journey, and each week I've broken it apart and reconstituted it towards what wants to come. So letting go and letting come with each rhythm of the inhale and the exhale. And the thing that I just feel so strongly is it always wants to be more complicated, and there are always more words to put in. And I always feel like I'm missing so much of the detail and the beauty of what's shared. But then I also feel more strongly that it needs to be simpler, that somehow what needs to be here will be here, and our step will be clear, Our commitment will be clear, like that there's some quieting down or something, or some real essential stripping away that will help the purest gesture or the move that's ours to make become clear. And that's what I've been trying to do with the drawing. And I look forward to seeing how it lands in your beings and what it generates for you today.
Thank you, Kelvy. And we'll just stay with this image for a moment and type directly into the chat using the prompts I see, I sense, and I feel. I see, I sense, I feel. And just a few of those. I sense readiness. I see a bird taking off. Phoenix rising. I feel a flower blooming out of the blood of the past. So many beautiful images coming through. Thank you all. And thank you, Kelvy, for this. And I know Eileen has just a few more moments with us. So Eileen, I would love to turn it over to you to give us some closing thoughts before you go.
Thank you. Thanks, Antoinette. And thanks, Otto. And thanks to everyone for listening. Feel heard. Strange. And I guess I was thinking about having a big vision and being a part of a bigger consciousness, like with this journey, and also kind of that importance of that what's mine, what's that next thing, what do I say yes to, what is mine to do, and I have this quote in my office, and I just would leave you with it. It's one of my favorite quotes, and it's Mother Teresa, and there are no great acts, only small acts with great love.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Thank you. And I send it to you, Otto, just in case you want to share anything as Eileen sends off.
Thank you, Eileen, for embodying what we are striving towards. And I started the session with Dr. Noel, kind of the Aboriginal elder. All we need to do is to have a piece of the path to the future, and then cultivate that. And I was really, so Eileen, you talked about kind of this larger field of consciousness, and I was touched by Kelvy's image because it shows a being. It's a being that's beginning to take shape, beginning to take off, beginning to spread its wings. And I always liked to feel about, so to investigate social fields, right? The quality of our relationships that we could feel so clearly along the Gaia journey. So what if the field of connections that we have with each other were a living being, right? And what would that being want us to do? Not only what we want to do, but what does that being want us to do? And that's just, that's why Kelvy, your image is also so touching, because it makes us aware of a deeper level of our experience that we have been having with each other. And I know it's a piece of the future, but it's in our collective hands, so to speak, right? And how to hold that together and move it together and stay with it and stay true to it. That's really the inspiration that I take out of the session and also out of this journey. Thank you all.
Thank you, Otto. Thank you, Eileen. And thank you, everybody who's been on this journey. As I said in the beginning, this has been the arrival. And I said earlier that it's sort of like this train that's arrived at a stop, and we're all kind of getting off. And as Otto just shared with Kelvy's image, it's now time for each of us to take our wings. And just that the beauty of that image of rising up, that it is up to us, it is up to each of us. So we will gather together again at the Global Forum, July 10th and 11th. We will continue on this journey in the fall, or the Northern Hemisphere fall. And it is now on each of us. So you see GAIAjourney.org and #GAIAjourney for any other information that you may need. But at this moment, it is now up to each of us to spread our wings and to fly. And it is, as we heard from Otto and Eileen, it's not, these two people, even though we heard such wonderful stories from them and from Michelle today, as Eva shared in the beginning, it's these small acts. It's the, what can I do in this moment, in this place? And I love the League of Entrepreneurs. It's that, what's that thing that I can operate from? And where's that place that I can, follow that seed of intention that, that may have been clarifying for me. So I hope that is what we can all take from this journey together as we move forward, and that we may each spread our wings and move forward in this journey together. And then over the next few weeks and months, that we stay in touch and hear what we're all up to with our local roots and our global forest. And for now, we invite you to take a survey, actually, but really to help us seed the future, to continue to let us know and to share together that sense-making experience that will help us move forward. And so the hosts will put in the chat the survey. And as we say goodbye, I hope that you share with us as we go forward what might be in service to all of us, what is ours to do next. So we can all unmute and say goodbye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all.
Até sempre.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
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 Bye.